Hi, I'm Jeffy G. Did you ever notice that MIDI controllers come in set sizes? 25 key, 49 key, 61 key, and 88 keys. And they all have different configurations of those keys. A lot of the 88 key models are very piano-like. They have square cut keys, they're fully weighted with hammer action. The others are mainly synth keys or plastic organ keys, and they have semi-weighted versions, and sometimes they have unweighted keys. The interesting thing is, there's no reason for those number of keys. The Rhodes electric pianos were very popular. They had 73 keys, and there have been keyboards out there with 76. But most of the manufacturers stick to this 49, 61, and 88 model. Now, the Hammond B3 had two manuals of 61 keys each, but the lower manual used the bass keys as presets, so somewhat less than 61 on the lower manual. But the concept of the upper and the lower is something you need to remember because it relates to this video. Let me explain. I had been searching for a slightly bigger keyboard to play live gigs. I had 61 keys. I had a M-Audio Axiom Pro for many years, and it had semi-weighted keys, and it was great actually. I used it both in the studio and I used it for live performance. But the 61 keys often wasn't enough to break up the parts I was playing live into different layers. You know, if I was playing a complex song like a Michael Jackson song, it had to have strings and brass and piano and Rhodes sound. And to fit all of that into 61 keys was often a bit limiting. So I was always on the outlook for a 76 key keyboard. And there aren't a lot of them out there. But the Roland A33, which you see here, is a 76 key MIDI controller. And I managed to pick this up used at a very low price, because it wasn't in very good condition when I bought it. The thing I like about this keyboard is it has plastic synth style or organ style keys, and it's semi-weighted. And they're pretty easy to play, and 76 keys is great because it just gives you a lot more latitude. I use MainStage for live performance, so I often divide up this one keyboard into different sections depending on the songs that I'm playing. Now, back in the 90s, I used to use two keyboards, and most people did. My lower keyboard was a synth, and my upper keyboard was a controller. And on the controller, I had anywhere from 32 to 49 keys that I would play. But let me show you some details about this Roland A33 and what makes it unique and a little bit quirky. Most of the controllers that you would buy today have faders and pads and endless encoders. But I was looking for something just for live performance, so I knew I wasn't going to get all of that unless I spent a lot of money. There's only one fader control on this, and it's missing the knob, and it's assigned to volume, but you could assign it to anything you want. Now, one of the quirky things is that this has two MIDI out ports. A MIDI out 1 and a MIDI out 2, and you turn them off and on here, and they have to be assigned to different MIDI channels. So I've got MIDI port 1 assigned to channel 1 and MIDI port 2 assigned to channel 2. And the reason that exists is that there's this concept of an upper and lower setting. So you press that button for lower, this button for upper, and in here you can set the keyboard mode. You've got lower and upper turned on, or you can have a split where part of the keyboard is going to send data on MIDI channel 1 and part of the send data on MIDI channel 2. So at this stage, the quirkiness was that there was no way to route and control MIDI information, and if you wanted to control more than one sound module, this was one way to do it, have two separate outs. Some of the other buttons are fairly straightforward. Other than selecting upper and lower, it has a transpose button, which works just as you would expect, You press and hold the transpose button, hit another key, and it'll transpose into that key. It has an octave up and down button, and then it has 2 banks of 8 presets. And these were assigned to Roland's GS modules at the time. So they send program values and change information that was somewhat unique to the GS module that you might be using at the time. It all works. I captured those MIDI values to figure out what they were, but they're actually in the back of the manual, kind of buried. There's also dedicated buttons to chorus and reverb. Those just send MIDI messages that were probably set up by Roland's GS modules, but in my case, I'm actually using those 2 buttons to go next preset and previous preset when I've got MainStage up and running. It took me a long time to figure out how to use these preset buttons. These buttons have predefined titles on the keyboard. I don't know if you can see them in the camera. Number 1 is piano, and then it's got organ, guitar, bass, brass, and I thought, hey, wouldn't it be great if I actually picked presets within MainStage that match those particular titles? It would be a fast way to just switch while you're playing from one sound to the next. And those banks of 16 buttons have a patch. They call it patch A and patch B, but that's really what we call today banks. So you have a bank A and a bank B. So you have a total of potentially 32 presets that you can program. The process of finding out the program values that are the defaults for the A33 was a little bit complicated. I had MainStage open, actually a different MainStage concert, and every time I pressed one of the preset buttons, it would jump around, and it had no rhyme or reason to me, and I didn't understand it, to be honest. It wasn't until I did a MIDI capture that I figured out what values were being sent. I created this little table. A1 through 16 and B1 through B16 are actually sending these values. And as you can see, there's really no logic to it. I should have noticed this earlier when I looked at the manual. Here's the manual, but the way the manual is organized is a bit confusing. You see, you're on page 38, and then you're on page 141. So page 39 is called page 141. But if you look really closely at these presets, there is a value in here. CC00 is 0, 32 is 0, the program value is 1. And then for patch 2, it's 12. And so on. You can kind of work your way through. This one's 25, 19. And it basically gets back to this little chart that I created. Now back in MainStage, what I did was I created presets for each one of these. And if you look down in this area, you can see that you can assign a program change number to each one. So as you scroll through, you see program 2 is 12, 19, 25, 34. So if I press the buttons on the keyboard, it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So I was able to test it with the A33, so I knew it would work. But my plan is to have kind of this standard folder in each concert. I can cut and paste that from one concert to the next if I'm using the A33 and if I want to use those standard assignments. There are lots of things that you can program in this keyboard. You can program the behavior of the sustain pedal and the modulation wheel and the pitch bend and many other things. And there's quite a complicated sequence going through the edit menu and then choosing different parameters and then hitting the enter button, which is right here, number 11 button, and saving those presets. I found a little quirky that you might want to have the sustain pedal or the modulation wheel or the pitch bend behave differently depending on which preset. And the other challenge is that this has no LCD or LED display to confirm what the settings are. And there's actually no software that works with the Roland A33 to manage the configuration. No library tool, no utility. The Roland A33 was never that popular unless you were committed to the Roland GS sound modules. I find it to be perfect for my needs, and I'm thrilled to have this. If you have an opinion on MIDI controllers and the variations, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. And if this video was useful, click on the like button and send me some feedback. I'm always welcoming new people who subscribe to the channel and I would appreciate your support.